Now, to do this, these here, I could either use this tool that I used on the point of it, or I could use this tool. So I'll show you using this tool, because what I'm trying to do is just get an angle here. So you couldn't use, now notice I've got this in my stomach muscle, my turning muscle. This is the one Pete Holdis told me to buy, and it would change my life, and it did. So now this other end, so I can knock one of these things up pretty quickly if I'm just whirling away at it. And then I just sand it. After I sand it, all the grits, I go through and take a, I don't use a skew. I'm not competent with a skew as a skew. But if I take it and at the very end, once I've sanded it all, and I just touch this, it gives us very sharp lines that you can't get any other way. You can always use those for as a burn line if you use a burner's stretch line. I'm not going to continue this because I'm not going to just, you know, sand away, and I'll leave this on there so I can sand it fully and then just finish it. And I finish this end the same way. I just, you know, make it real small and then chop it off with a saw. Don't try to do it on the machine because it flies all over the place and cracks and everything else. And then just sand it, because I don't want that to be a sharp end anyway in a child's hand. And then you've got, I use T88 epoxy, which I use a lot to put it in there. So that's a handle, or that's a handle. And you can use, this is all this Cuisinart the pink. Around February or January, he sells a lot of the pink. And you can use any kind of wood you got. You know, this is, not sure what that is. I think it's West Coast. So let's look at another option. Just another project. How am I doing here? I'm doing okay. And this, instead of using a regular punch-out bar, Mike Bussey, one of our librarians, long-term librarians, took apart a foosball table, and I cut this off to match my Powermatic, and it works better than any other driver that I've ever known. So I use nothing but, well, not nothing but, I have some Nova chucks, and I have a few other types, but mostly the chucks that I have are the Vicmark, because they all, this jaw, there's a screw, there's 2 screws with each jaw. And if you don't have 2 screws with each jaw, it doesn't get secure, no matter what. It's just not strong enough for real tough stuff. So I'm gonna, what did I do with that? There we go. Use the same one. And this is not super critical, but I kind of line it up so it's roughly centered, that I can see it centered. And then lock that in. And this is the beginning. This won't work, but this will, and it's a Steve Sinner. And he makes, this is a robust, but not the comfort one. The comfort one is too constrained. You don't have enough room for your fingers. The Steve Center one, you have plenty of room for your fingers, and you can turn it one way or turn it the other. And it's built beautifully. This is maybe $45 or $55, somewhere in that range. Center. So he's very competitive price-wise, and his quality is absolutely superior. Some other one of Steve Center's and other inventions is for finials. So if this were, you know, inside of next to a finial, you've got plenty of room for your fingers to go underneath it and support it, like Cindy Drozda does. So it's really an amazing thing, and that's 45 or 55, somewhere in that range. It's advancedlathetools.com, and it's a website. So I make sure that that is solid, and I'm going to again use this one, and I'm not going to attempt to. That one is just a little bit off center, a little bit, maybe too much off center. So I'm going to work on. Doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know why that's, okay, it should be spinning. This is the Ashley Isles tool again. Got it nicely rounded, and it doesn't take very long. And this is perfectly round. Now, I used to use the spindle gouge for this purpose, but now I use the bowl gouge. Why? Because it's so much stronger. And I've kept experimenting because do a lot of production work. If I take this, first of all, I'm going to get it a little closer. And of course, you're not supposed to move the tool rest while you're doing that, but everybody does it anyway. But I can do 1, 2, 3 passes. With a spindle gouge, I couldn't do that. 1, 2, 3, and that's my standard. If I can't do that, then something's wrong. Now I haven't embedded this because I use it very lightly. This is a detail gouge, but eventually it's coming out of the handle and then going to go into something where I can choke it up and get it small. But I only use it for this purpose. At this point, I don't really put any stress on it, so therefore it lives in its own little handle. But now I'll go to the spindle gouge, and I'll start this. You got to recognize that this is between centers. And if I cut it totally off at this point, it's going to be fairly weak. So I'm going to go in here while it's still strong. And I'm going to make it smaller. And then I'm going to just start it by just scooping away. Then I'll go back to this side, take the tailstock away. That doesn't sound good. No, that's solid. That's solid. But something was going on in the headstock there. I thought it was a loose, So now my end is nice and flat. And I could use this and continue the whole thing, but I'm going to use yet another Ashley Isles tool. And this is, again, spindle roughing gouge, but 3/8, solid core, and it's on your listing. But if I put it in a regular handle, I'd have nothing but vibration because it's just too thin. So I put it in there, bring it down, tighten it up. And if I was just, you know, sometimes I warm up by doing a half dozen of these things. You know, and then you just use a piece of like 150. That's all you need. And so now I've got the makings of a top, but you can see right here, it's kind of messy and it's not totally centered. And back here, it's messy. So how do I solve that? Well, it's purple, but we're gonna use red. I use Tombow markers. Get these at Michael's. It hides all the ills. Secret of a production turner is don't do anything more than you have to. And now that looks kind of pretty. Now, if I had my purple one, or I did have yellow, but yellow doesn't hide ills. So at that point, I would take my doctor's finish, and I'll be right back. I'm just going to grab a piece of paper towel. This is called doctor's finish, and it's on the list as well. And just trying to keep this. And I typically protect the bed some, but I'm only going to do it once, so it's not like it's doctor's finish, and that's comes out. Not a jar like this, but doctor's finish. He's from Oregon or Washington State, and I'll just do that. And typically I keep all this stuff up on I have a rack that I built on the top of my lathe. And so that's almost done. So I'm going to take, at this point, my skew, if I can find my skew again. Here we go. And this is what I use the skew for, is just cutting it off, making little points. And again, take a little sandpaper, hit that, take a little doctor's stuff, which I have typically on a big platform up here. And a lot of what I do is organization. Everything's got to have its place. It never leaves that spot as long as you're turning, and it goes right back into that spot. Okay, there we go. And so this was done pretty quickly, but well, I can spin all day long. So now, a lot of people, they use this to break it loose, and you should not do that because you're damaging those threads in your sizing. So if you do it this way, break it loose properly, and then you catch it so that you're not unscrewing it like this. You're holding it with one hand and unscrewing it with the other. So I can put my other, how are we doing on time? I guess okay. Okay. This is the other, and I do this just to show you that other things can be done. This one I've just taken it and made it a cylinder and cut a little dovetail in that. And when I cut that little dovetail, I use my own developed tool, and I've been using more and more as I've gotten more experience. I use the, let me make sure that's tight. There's a lock. Here we go. There we go. Oh, I think that may have been the reason it didn't, it was wavering there for a minute. But I use the tailstock more and more because I've blown up pieces because I just was too lazy to use a tailstock. And so it's not a nice thing when you lose a really nice piece of wood. It doesn't make you feel good. Okay, needs a little bit more space for the, I've got a smaller tool rest, but I didn't bring it. I figured the 4-inch would do me, and it pretty well does. Or the, whatever this is, 5-inch, 6-inch. That's a 9-inch, so this is probably 6. So this is what I call a Bavarian top. And bring it down almost there, and then I guesstimate, and it's chattering a little bit because it's not totally around. It also may be a grain issue, just a piece of scrap wood. Just giving myself some room. And then I could either use the spindle gouge or the bowl gouge. In this case, I just grabbed the spindle gouge, so that's fine. And again, my standard to a great extent is 3 passes and I've got something done. And once you've done 1,000 of them, it's pretty easy. But getting to the 1,000 is a challenge. But you use these to warm up. You know, if you just get a bunch of these scraps from the shock pile, you can make dozens of these. But it's a Bavarian top because I've never seen it anywhere in the United States. I was in the military in Germany, and our babysitter knew a Turner. We went back to visit her in the 90s, and she had a bunch of these tops on her dining room table, and I liked the design. So you can take that one, you can make, you know, grooves in it if you want to. Where's my groove maker? Here we go. You can make a groove and then a couple more. You just got to make sure the flat is up on these pyramid tools. This is a piece of shock steel with a handle built in. I just put this in there. If they throw in the trash, not anymore, they give them to me and I bring them in and put them in the auction. But it's high-speed steel. It's fabulous. So now I've got those. I could hit it with a little bit of 220 if I wanted to, but it's really not necessary. But what I'm going to do before I do any coloring is I'm going to do a little bit more. Oh, how do I want to do this? At this point, I can take the tailstock away. I really want to get that a little closer, even though it's verboten to. But the control I have with this handle and the shortness of the tool exposed is amazingly control. It just triples your control immediately. So now, you know, this stuff here, I can just use a parting tool. I'm going to do with my, there we go. Part of it is this, I've got this set on a low speed, so it's only 1200. And if I was running at 1600, it would be better. But I'm not going to take the time. And if it bucks you a little bit, it's just because of the wood. And I'm pressing down really hard with my thumb. And I'm trying to take a less of a bite if it's kicking me. But the key to it is that pressure on the thumb. So I've got that, and then I'm going to take my little, and I can turn it so I can go right in. These spindle roughing gouges, even though they're tiny, are amazingly efficient, much more so than the spindle gouge. And you get right down in the corner if you want to. So now, there's probably a little roughness right there, so I'm going to clean it up with a spindle gouge, which ultimately is a little bit more precise than a spindle roughing gouge. But the combination of those Ashley Isles tools, the sharpness that they hold, they're M2 high-speed steel. I have learned to swear by them. So now if I take, let's take yellow and bright. And so I'll just take the yellow. The kids like to see this develop. If I'm giving away tops, which I do sometimes, I ask them what their two favorite colors are. And they got to be kind of contrasting. And then, like the other top, I just slow it down and take some of this stuff. I'll wipe that off in a second. My tool rest is pretty messy because I always don't cover it. Thank you. And once I get part of it done, it really doesn't stain anything. Not sure, it's got some wax in it and it's got some other stuff in it. Doctor's Workshop. And it's a finish that doesn't stink up my workshop at all. And you can't smell it. I can't smell it. And it's really user friendly, and if a kid chewed on it, it's totally non-toxic. So that's my motivation for using it, and I'm sharing it because I think it's a great product and it's kid friendly and all kinds of friendly. I could have made this a lot thinner if I'd chosen. But by using a skew like that, I never used to use a skew like that. I never used to use a bull gouge to do spindle work. But Katie bar the door, there's no reason not to. Try using different tools. That's the lesson that I'd love you to take away. Is you use tools for, try a different tool. Try a bull gouge instead of a spindle gouge. Try a spindle roughing gouge instead of a spindle gouge. Try anything. This one has a dance at the end. That wasn't a particularly good spin, so it went right into a dance. But if you do a good spin like this, it will probably last for a minute. And then it'll go into a dance. And I call it the hoochie coochie because it kind of moves. So while I've got this chuck on, I'm going to move to this. I'm going to move to this just to plunk this in there and show you a major trick, what I think is a major trick, on doing a bowl bottom. And you can see where I've done this. I first of all did the outside, and then I inlaid the turquoise and smoothed it all out. And then I did the inside and inlaid the turquoise and smoothed it all out as well. And now I, at home to save time, I just cut this little slot in here so this would just fit kind of snug. And I could bring the tailstock up. Always leave that center as long or as much as you can. But there's a lesson in here. I like the longer one because it'll reach in. It'll reach in almost to the end. And I'm going to use a combination of these two things. I used this in a demo. This piece of metal cost me $30 at Craft Supplies many years ago. And and it works great, but it's very small. This came off a power drill. It cost me nothing. I just buried it in the handle. But these are, this one is a point tool, but on the other side of it, I have it's cut at an angle. And I just wing that angle. It's not critical. Maybe it's 30 degrees, maybe it's 40 degrees, I don't care. But the key to it is I put it up against the wheel so that there's a burr right along the top here. Same way with this one. It's smaller, and there's a burr right here. Now this one is fairly large. There's a lot of room. So I'm going to bring it like this. And I'm going to just use the burr to cut. But what I do is, I know how thick this is, and I know I don't make my bowl super thick especially near the bottom. I want a little bit more heft at the bottom. So I've already felt this one when I was handling it, and I know that it's got plenty of meat there. But I like a nice lift curve. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just this is very dry walnut. Let's see where the teeth came in there. So I've got to go a little further. So I'm not going to try to sharpen this, although it probably could use some. I could actually use this one because it's sharper. You can feel it, that it's that much sharper. and I'm trying to get all the marks off, which I have effectively done. And so, you know, at this point, now maybe, no, that's not. So I'm going to take 150 and take a quick look at what it looks like with a little bit of sanding. But that's, I like a foot that has that curve and that has that lift. And I'm going to spend more time at home doing that, but now I'm going to take and this is a one where you have to have absolute tool control is cut. Because if you don't have absolute tool control, you'll ruin your bowl at this point. But if I want to undercut that, first of all, I'm going to bring it up to a pretty good speed, but then I'm going to come down, take a slice, come down and take another slice. Don't forget, it's just being held on with. And so I'm not going to try to finish this because it's going to take a lot of sanding and I want to keep that center point while I do it. But that is a curve. And if I've got some turquoise, there's a piece of turquoise I'm already looking at to put in there. And so that's the trick of the bottoms that I do. And you can see where there's a defect. It could use a little turquoise in there. And so what I might end by doing is sanding this and really finishing this up to, you know, 300 or 400, and then finish cutting this off and do all that by hand, a little bit of turquoise and using one of these discs, sitting down, holding it in close to my body and doing this. The key to it is I would never try to do this standing up. I need all the support I can get, and you're just brushing it. And that is unacceptable to have an opening down there because the bottom should look as good as the top. But all these things have little stuff in them. So, so do we have to be out of here at 8? Close. We're close. Okay. Let me cover one point without doing it. And this is on a bowl, and I saw Glenn Lucas do this recently, but I've never, at the AAW online symposium, I've never seen another turner do it. Maybe you have, I just missed it. And these are not the greatest jaws for it, but I'm just gonna use them just to hold it temporarily. And if I take my bowl gouge, the first thing I do, well, actually, it'd be just as fast to just do it, I think. Let me see if I can get some of this stuff out of here so I can just get the tail scope moved over. That's good enough. So now I've got my 1/2-inch bowl gouge, which has this is a batty bolster and a batty handle. And the robust combination is so much better. But in turning the outside of a bowl is fairly simple. Most people know the push cut, but the inside of the bowl, I start off by doing because it's impossible to get a catch when you do it this way. You know, because whoops. This is not the right chuck for it. No question, this is too soft. So I'll have to walk you through it. Once I make this, then I will move this back and I will start at around here, 90 degrees, go straight in, go straight in, go straight in. So basically this whole center mass is there. And the trick, once you get this done, then the trick is to come back and put it like this and just go straight in, because what you're doing by going straight in is you're not interfering with the end grain at all. You're just cutting, and it's just if you watch the demos, Ireland in the AEW, he actually, and that's the only time I've ever seen it, but you just push straight in and get rid of all that bulk, and then you go back to making it deeper and then go straight in. If you just try that cut, you'll find it just amazingly easy to do with painless on the inside of a bowl. I was hoping to do that, but I think I'm just about out of time. And if there's any, let me see. I was going to do, wanted to show you the other part of this thing. Oh, it is. This is on your list, but it's and always, you only need about 3 threads. So use some spacers here to do that. But you can also use this particular one. It's in the craft supply catalog. You can use that, or you can turn it around, and now they have an even bigger one. So you can use it in multiple different sizes. So this is the only screw check that you'll ever need. And the screw is replaceable through a aperture here. So you can, if this ever breaks, which I find it hard to believe that it would. But the beauty of it is you've got the small size. This is like 1.5 inches, and you've got 2.5 inches and 3.5 inches. And I just put these spacers on there so that you only got three threads, 3.5 threads. That's all you need. And so the spacers are key. I think I've talked about the sandpaper before, clipping off the corners, and you know, you can save by buying this stuff in sheets. This Rhino Grip, by the way, is made in Portugal. It's not Chinese. Every bit of sandpaper that's sold out of Industrial Abrasives, this woman-owned company in Pennsylvania, is from Portugal. When this woman president, CEO, she visits the town has a major celebration in her honor every time she visits, because the whole town is employed. They use a lot of hand techniques that other manufacturers don't use. They use a lot more quality control than others. The entire town is employed making sandpaper. And she is a good part of their economic viability and success. And this stuff is heavier duty backing than the stuff you can get at Klingspor or anywhere else. I've done studies on this thing, and it's a grade heavier. It's consistently good. You can just use a regular scissors. Don't use your wife's sewing scissors, but regular scissors to cut these into squares, and then clip the corners off. So that when you have, say this is 80 grit, all I do is put this on here. Yeah. Like this, find a pair of scissors. I had a pair around here. Take my word for it. Just clip partially so it still wraps around. That was covered in my last tips and tricks. A lot of those things are still, as a matter of fact, all of them are still current. I've tried to update you on some of the more recent ones I found. This Ashley Isles tools, I only had one tool back in 2014. You know, now I've got all the key tools, and they're just unbelievable. But this inside of a bowl is fantastic, and you actually don't even need to clip them. If they get in the way, you clip them, but you just do this and go away. And when you do the inside of it, I'm like Pete Holtis used to be. I use T88 when I do a glue up job. When this starts to break loose, I just glue it. And I get, years out of these things just by forcing T88 epoxy into the grooves, and it makes it stronger. So actually with more of this, it works better with the 80 grit because it doesn't have as much flex. And these things last forever. This just does not go bad if you use a separate mandrel for each grade. In other words, the mandrels only cost like $4.50 on the group buy. They would cost $8 or $9 anywhere else, and they're quality things. So I buy 6, you know, so 80, 100, 120, 150, 180, 220. So you get 6 of those, and the only time that you just change the mandrels, pull it out of here. Now I've got this locked in at the moment, but you don't have to have it locked in. If you're pushing too hard and it's spinning, then you back off a little bit and it'll be just fine. And I think that's mostly what I had to offer. There's all kinds of little, if you got a flat piece, this is another driver that a beginner loves because it gives you a flat and it gives you a slight pin, and it really is secure because it's got this rim, and the pin. So it's in your headstock is a driver, and it's a robust one. I think they're fabulous pieces. You know, this is one of my inside bowl negative rate scrapers. You know, if I did this on the inside, the last thing I would do is just run this around. And a beautiful negative rate scraper, you can do it flat. You can do it actually 5 degrees lower and it won't catch. 10 degrees and you got a major catch. So you want to get it flat or slightly up, very slightly up, but flat is fine. And beginners love it because flat is flat. It's pretty hard to mess up. I mean, you know where the lathe is, and if it's flat and they're off by 5 degrees, it doesn't make any difference. You're not going to get a catch. And you can do the entire inside. With a regular scraper, you can only do the bottom third with a regular scraper safely. Otherwise, it starts self-feeding and digging in. With this, you can do all the way from the bottom to the very top, and you can go back and forth all day long without worrying about a catch. So I think I'm hoping I've covered most of the points that I wanted to cover, and I've got a little cleanup, so I think I'll close it up at this point. Thank you.
So Dave, as one of our chat comments was, this is like drinking from a fire hose. I think you've really presented a wealth of information here, and we really want to thank you for a great presentation. You know, just a lot of great comments in the chat. I know you can't see them, but yeah, I think we got a great response from everyone. And
well,
thank you very much.
There's a question. Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So are there any more questions, Dave? I see a lot of thank yous and amazings and all of that kind of stuff, but any questions for Dave before we wrap up?
Yeah. Well, feel free to email me or call me with any questions as well. And if you have a list of the questions or concerns, if you give me those, I'll put together a paper and we can distribute it with the answers. Because it's all about letting you know at least one way of doing it that's been successful for me.
Well, thanks so much, Dave. And next month we'll be having Mike Skiba is going to do his thought through, which is a really interesting piece, and I want to see how he does these things. And then in October we're going to have Cindy Drozda. Also next week, Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a demo for the Pueblo Club right from here, and so I don't know if anybody wants to tune into that. If you're really bored, but have nothing better to do. But thanks to everyone who showed up, and this was definitely a better turnout than we've had for our daytime meetings. and we will keep trying to do our best to make this work for everybody. Yeah, and Keith Mosner says we could do a Q&A. In the chat is where we would do that. I was trying to answer things that were in the chat, but I didn't see them all. So we'll keep working on it. Any suggestions, please contact me or Sonny, Larry, Patrick, with anybody, and we'll just try and keep getting better at this. Once again, thanks everybody for coming, and I'm going to close this out and we'll get packed up. Thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't do the. Oh well.